You've been gaslit into believing mental health is always weighed fairly in family court. The truth, it can be used as a safeguard or a weapon in divorce, custody, and child placement battles. We are your deep throating informants, Dr. Tara Lynn and therapist Jen, and this is the Gaslit Truth Podcast. Today we have a special guest, McKenna Zimmerman. McKenna is a family law attorney from the law firm Peterson, Burke, and Cross SC. She is a native to the Green Bay area, woohoo, and studied psychology during undergrad and earned her law degree from Marquette University. Welcome, McKenna, to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here today.
Yes, I'm happy to have a local person to
I was
talk
gonna
to.
say,
Like,
get
we
it,
never get
Marquette.
local
Hell
people
yeah.
on the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
We always get people across the United States, usually sometimes in different countries, but it's always cool to have someone in our own backyard. So we're
Yes.
happy to have you here today.
Born and
Yes.
raised. Go
Tell
Pack.
us how you really feel about the Green Bay Packers. And that's a trick question, so don't answer it wrong.
I'm hoping they have a great year.
Oh, look at her little answer. You could
I
have said,
have
I
to
don't
put
give
them
a
on my
shit, Jen.
fantasy team, so
Oh,
hoping
Oh,
all
they
right.
do.
Okay. All
okay.
right.
All right. All right. All right. So let's get to it. So, our listeners have some questions about how mental health is leveraged in court, particularly family court. And Jen and I, as therapists, we've actually had some of our clients get to this problem in family court. So, we were hoping to get some insight from you and start wherever you believe is the best place to begin here.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack with mental health in the court system. I think, first of all, it's not always relevant. I think you're going to see it more relevant in cases, of course, where there's children. So if there's a divorce, there's no children or no minor children, at least, they're grown up out of the home, it might just really not be relevant. If there's no children and say, the only thing to figure out is property division, the financial aspect, unless there's some underlying contributor to the mental health, maybe the mental health there's is due to addiction, like a gambling addiction, or somebody's in a manic episode and they're spending a bunch of marital funds. Maybe it will still be relevant, even if there's not children in that sense. But again, we typically see mental health come up as a hot topic in the courts when there is children involved, of course, because the courts are worried about the impact that it has on the children, and especially if there's a guardian ad litem involved in the case, that's going to
Yeah.
be a concern of theirs.
Could you explain to our listeners, because not everybody understands, what is a guardian ad litem?
Yeah, so a guardian ad litem is an attorney. They do specialized training. They have to do some certain prerequisites to get that position, but they essentially are appointed in cases involving minor children, divorce, can be custody placement, um, child support cases, anything like that. They represent the best interests of the child. So it is their job to come in. They do a pretty comprehensive investigation, you could call it. They talk to the parents, they talk to the child if they're old enough to voice their wishes and have conversation. They may also talk to teachers, counselors. They can talk to doctors, pretty much anyone. They have a lot of ability to do and talk to a lot of people, get records. So yeah, they're there to look out for the best interest of the children.
Okay.
Do you have a question, Jen?
No, go ahead. I was
No,
going to, but I'm like, I'm
well,
just gonna hang tight on it for a second
yeah,
because you're
yeah,
probably
yeah.
gonna
Because
answer it.
because I've had a lot of over the course of my career, which has been pretty long, a lot of interactions with multiple guardian ad litems, and my question always is like, where does the relevance show up, and who makes it relevant? Is it the guardian ad litem that usually makes it relevant, or is it typically one of the parents? Like, is it a concern there? Like, is it normal, customary for a guardian ad litem to start digging into mental health in the beginning, or does there have to be like a somebody bringing it up as an issue?
I think it typically comes from one of the parties. They know the other party. There might already be a history there. If it's something more recent, that was maybe triggered by the divorce or by the court case that's going on, maybe it came out in a court proceeding and it was kind of obvious to everyone, then the guardian ad litem might have got, tipped off to that on their own. But typically, I would say it comes from one of the parties who then shares that information with a guardian ad litem.
I'm going to guess it's usually not the party with the mental health disorder that's bringing it up, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So, can we talk a little bit about how mental health can be leveraged negatively in court?
Yeah. If somebody has a long history of mental health, especially if it's went untreated, that can certainly, there's a difference between having a mental health issue, having something diagnosed and getting treatment, working really hard to manage that, whether that be, through counseling, therapy, medication, whichever route they're taking, um, and not getting treated. So I think it comes up in that context a lot. If there's this long history there, hey, if they haven't been doing anything and it's been boiling over, in marital issues and affecting the family, that's a lot of the times where that comes out. So I think that also makes a difference. Have they been getting treatment? Is this something new? Is this something that's been going on? I think when there's a history there, it's a lot easier to point to things. You might have records, you might have text messages, or if there was fights and there was videos taken, if there was pictures, video, there's more evidence if it's been an ongoing issue.
McKenna, can you talk about what would constitute treatment?
Treatment.
Because
I
like
mean,
in your eyes, right? Like what constitutes
In the eyes of the
treatment
law, what constitutes
in the eyes
treatment?
of the
Yeah.
law? Yes.
treatment. I mean, I think it just, are you doing steps to address, hey, do you know you have a problem? And are you doing steps to address that? I don't think they, counseling. Are you going counseling? Are you talking to somebody? Are you seeing a psychiatrist? Are you following your doctor's recommendations? Are you following your psychiatrist's recommendation, whether that be to take certain medications or otherwise? Yeah, I think anytime a court sees something that is from a professional, a licensed professional, that's going to have, typically have more weight than, oh, I'm talking to my friend who, has studied or has an interest in psychology.
Right. Right.
That happens a lot. That really
It
d
does.
I went to school for psychology once,
Right.
and, yeah, or I slept at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So I wanna say, the one thing that stuck out to me is following what, like, a psychiatrist says, or
Mhm.
so I feel like within that following, is there choice? Like, does that person get choice? Because, somebody can say, "Well, they said she should be on medications and she's choosing not to. She's choosing a different route."
Mhm.
Is that then can that be leveraged in and of itself that the person is choosing a different route to address their mental health? Because that almost feels like a commitment.
Right.
It's like running the line of a commitment, yeah.
Yeah, I would say if you are, maybe the attorney that's representing the person that is having some mental health struggles in that situation, if they are not comfortable with or, don't feel like medication is helping them or they have some doubts about it, I think that would be a situation where you would bring in another doctor and get a second opinion, see if that recommendation is different. And then that is something that you could, present to the court as a second opinion to say, hey, this one's saying this doctor's saying this, for XYZ reason, I'm not comfortable taking medication. And I think that this is better for myself. This doctor says it's better, or that it's an option not to, to manage my mental health and not take medication. Again, having a professional, having that documented and written is certainly going to be helpful rather than just saying, oh, I don't want to, I don't like it. I think that has to be unpacked more. Why is it not working? Why do you not want to take medication? Is there other options we can look at? So I think it would be that individual's job and kind of the job of their attorney to help them in
Sure.
getting that documentation to show, hey, there is other options that we think could work here.
Do you feel like medication is weighed more heavily as treatment than anything else in court?
Not, I guess not that I've seen. I haven't seen a ton of, I think it's more often where you would see counseling or meeting with therapists or psychiatrists, more of the counseling aspect of things. I guess for cases that I've worked on, I haven't seen a ton where there's medication requirements.
Mhm. Or just the idea that medication is weighed more heavily as a treatment, right? Like, so when we think about mental health, because Jen and I talk about medications all the time, when we think about
Mhm.
mental health, like treatment, the definition of treatment typically comes with medication first as treatment,
Mm,
right? And I know we know that logically it doesn't,
yeah,
but in circles it certainly does. So I was just curious if, medication is like, well, yeah, you definitely need meds because I always think about the people who are injured by medications as well. So
mhm,
if someone's been injured by a med, um, is that a conversation as well? Like the med made them worse.
Right.
And there hasn't
yeah,
been anything that has, helped them or they don't want to be on medications anymore, which isn't always a bad thing.
yeah,
Right? It's just a thing. So I think that's where I get kinda lost in the weeds on this conversation is personal choice with, mental health care or treatment, right? And
yeah,
who gets to decide if someone has a mental illness that's, enough to take your child away? So, if you
right.
can thinking through that, are there certain things that someone would definitely with a mental health issue be looked at as not capable? I mean, I get the extreme cases of, like, suicidality, homicidality, things like
Mhm.
that, but do you have any insight as to, like, what else would really be taken into consideration? I'm trying to reduce fear around it, because I know some people go in, "Well, I can't tell them that I'm depressed or I have a history of alcoholism," or whatever, like, so what are some of the things that can kind of reduce the fear around disclosure, of mental health issues and make it so that it's not weaponized in the same way.
Yeah, I think, one thing is really getting in front of it, especially, if there is a guardian ad litem involved and you're worried that the other party is going to bring it up or that they're going to get to the guardian ad litem first and share that information. I think getting ahead of it is huge. Going, talking either if you have an attorney, talking with your attorney, and then talking to the guardian ad litem together to make sure that comes across how you want it to. Or, if you're unrepresented, reaching out to the guardian ad litem and having a conversation about it. I think transparency is a good idea to
Mhm,
get in front of it, say, hey, this is what I struggled with in the past, and acknowledging that. And then again, highlighting what you've done to work on that. And again,
mhm.
that might not always be medication. And if it's not, explaining why. Hey, I was on medication. It didn't work for me. I had a bad reaction to it. I actually felt like it made things worse for me. But these are things that I am doing. And it's something that I want to continue to focus on and work hard on.
I
Um,
Yeah, I'm wondering why you would have to explain why it wasn't medication if it was your choice to get treatment in a certain way. Can you offer some insight on that?
I'm just thinking if they were on a medication and there was documentation of that
Oh,
provided, and then, they'd say, oh, why did you stop this? You'd want to, of course, explain
sure, okay,
why.
I understand what you're saying. I thought you were saying, like, you have to explain yourself why you chose not to do medication with a mental health
No,
issue,
I'm just thinking
so
if it was documented that you were
we're
previously
what
on
at
and
one
then you
point.
stopped it abruptly, explain,
Right.
this is the path that I was on. I decided to go a different route.
Mhm. Have
Yeah.
you seen in court, like, truly, like, weaponized mental health disorders, whether it's family court or otherwise, that shouldn't have been? That you're like, "Wow, this is, like, crazy that this is being brought up in such a way." And you don't have to disclose, like, but, like, have you
Right.
heard of or a case law or anything like that where it was really, truly weaponized? And what that would look like if someone felt like they were being weaponized, what is that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I haven't had a ton of cases with mental health where it's been a super hot topic. but I'm sure, people like to throw around, oh, they're a narcissist. I see that one all the time.
Ugh.
Oh, let's talk about this for a second.
Let's talk about it.
Thanks for
Yep.
bringing that
Yeah,
up.
I'm
Yeah.
yeah,
glad you said that. Yes.
yeah.
Yes. And I don't know again how much you're willing to share. But just curious to know when that happens, how many times have you had an expert like a psychologist come in and say, "Yes, he's a narcissist. She's a narcissist,
Right.
diagnosable." You haven't, have you?
No, no.
No. All right,
People don't want to
everyone
spend money
listening,
on
like
that.
hear
Yeah,
that for a minute. Here's from the legal attorney side. So you hear it from the shrink side of us going, narcissism is like super rare, people, like
yeah,
truly,
yep.
right? It's like the hot
Well, and
thing
what
now
she
the
did
last
It
say
few
is
is.
years.
people don't wanna spend money on that. I heard
Yeah.
people don't wanna spend so you're when you say people don't wanna spend money on that, are you talking about like a psych eval?
That and bringing like experts
Yeah.
into court.
Experts.
Oftentimes like a party, especially if mental health is getting brought up, they'll say, "Oh, I want a psych eval done." So
Mhm.
they'll file a motion, ask
Yep.
the judge.
That would be weaponizing. I think
Yeah,
that would be an example of
yeah. So
weaponizing.
that does happen. I would say a guardian ad litem can also
Mhm.
request that.
Yep.
If it's a party asking, "Oh, I want you to do a psych eval on the other party," I've seen a lot of the courts say, "Okay, you're both getting them."
Yeah,
Oh,
which is fair. That's
which is
fair.
fair. It
Yeah.
is
Right.
fair.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's something that I've seen happen. Like, hey, we're just going to do them for both of you. But again, a lot of people, once it comes down to number one, finding somebody to do them,
Mhm.
especially here in Wisconsin, it is so hard to find a licensed psychologist or a licensed psychiatrist who does that and will do it in the context of a family law case.
Yep.
Right.
Because, along with
Oh
that
yeah.
comes testifying in court if this goes to
Mhm.
trial. So,
Well, and I also want to point out that, having had interactions with guardian ad litems and things like that, they're always wanting information about the children, right?
mhm,
What do you think about the children? I'm like, I have no idea. I
You
don't
we
work with the
cannot speak.
children.
Yeah, you can't
right.
Right.
speak
I
to it.
can't speak to so many things. And I think
Mhm.
therapists get that wrong because they see the parent and then they speak for the child and they really shouldn't be
Mhm.
at all because that's a very big specialty
Mhm.
for child custody evals and things like that. And I feel like sometimes it's brought about as a very flippant thing. Well, you should know because you work with the mom or you work with the dad. What do you think? I'm like, I have no idea. I have zero idea unless they are in active addiction or something.
Right.
Then you might know, right? But
Yeah.
then you can say that active addiction. I can't say how honestly can't say how someone parents when they're in active addiction.
Right.
Mhm.
Really can't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so you hear the request coming through or the verbiage of somebody who's got certain diagnoses like those buzzword diagnoses, right? Like narcissist, right? Like this person's a narcissist, right? And
Yeah.
it sounds like that one doesn't come to fruition very often where you've got yep, here comes the expert comes in, does the eval and says, "Yep, he's a narcissist or she's a narcissist."
Right.
What
All
would be
right.
the relevance of saying someone's a narcissist in court?
Is it really? I mean, I think it's pretty easy to see that people like to throw that word around. They're in the middle, especially if it's a divorce. They don't like each other. They're gonna say X. It's just, we're here to focus on the child issues, custody placement, property division, finances.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's really just not, you
I
know,
Right.
would guess
unless it's
he calls her bipolar, she calls him a narcissist, and that's probably how that plays out.
correct. Yeah, yeah. A lot of the times,
Yeah.
that is,
Okay. So I've got a question around the world of informed consent, which for us is a huge deal. Um, there are risks, there are benefits, and are there other alternatives? Okay. And we have clients, I've had several clients that have come to me, and I just kind of wonder if this advice is fair or not from your lens, McKenna. So I have clients that will come and they'll be going through a divorce. And in the context of therapy, they will say to me, "Jen, I want all of my records. I want
Mhm.
all of my therapy notes because I want to use this in some way, shape, or form as some kind of leverage that they need, whether it's to show that they are like actively seeking out mental health
Mhm.
services, or it's to show that, which many people believe, that the notes are going to reflect a heightened level of distress or trauma that they are going through from the other party, which is why they were seeking out services, right? Like, I'm going to see a therapist because I'm going through a divorce, and part of that divorce has got
Yeah.
all this trauma tied to it, right? So they're wanting to, for one reason or another, obtain their clinical notes from
Mhm.
meeting with a counselor. And so when people ask me for that, I have a really honest discussion with them
Mhm.
about the benefits and the risks for
Yeah.
them of doing that.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of just wondering, from your lens, when it comes to the risks for that, right? Like, I know that there can be benefits, but do you see risks in that for clients if they bring those notes forward to court hoping it's going to help them, when
Yeah.
in
And it
fact
hurts them, and
it
it hurts them.
hurts them greatly?
Yeah, yeah. So like if if you I represent somebody and we want records, we usually do a subpoena to get those records.
Yep.
And when you do a subpoena, you have to provide that subpoena to the opposing party, say, hey, this is what we're doing. Um, and yeah, they could potentially have access to those documents, or if they know about it, um, that could come to light.
Yeah.
So it, they might see their own records. Oh, I think counseling's been going great. They don't know what their therapist has been writing in their notes.
Well,
Right.
that's just it.
That's
I think
that's
that's
just that's the
that's
whole
part
problem.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's part of the issue. And so I was kind of curious to know if you've seen that come, because I have learned over the
Yeah.
years to have a very honest conversation with my clients the first time that they say, "Hey, I would like to, subpoena these records and get them for it's usually divorce.
Yeah.
Typically is when it comes up, is for divorce court." And I talk with my clients about how risky that could be for them.
Right.
Um, and I don't think people have a full understanding of that. And so
No, they
they
don't.
really truly don't, right? Like, they want to show, I've been seeing a therapist, and because been having a lot of distress.
Yeah.
My life is very distressful.
Mhm.
And I know, Jen, that's all I talk with you about.
Yeah.
And it's going to be in all of these notes. When in reality, sometimes that's really truly not how dictation is done,
Mhm.
at all. And oftentimes it's not our opinion. We're not in there writing, because of divorce,
Yeah.
Jane Doe has PTSD.
Right.
That's not how we do things. Maybe some counselors do, but that's not how we do things, because a straight line between A and B does not equal that. And so I think that that's a very honest conversation that therapists need to have with their clients. But then also, here's you on the other end going, yeah, sometimes this can be very dangerous because that info is out, and
Yep.
anything can be used against you then,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, once the
right?
record's, good, bad, and if it's more so they just want to show that they've been having appointments and going regularly, I think there's other ways to
To
get that
prove that.
information without
Yes.
all of the notes that come along with it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
because
Well, because
in
I
those
think I think in the notes, a lot of times what they're I'm just gonna grossly generalize. A woman is asking for the notes because she's hoping that it says in there that she has been traumatized by her partner
Mhm.
they're now going through divorce.
Yeah.
Mhm.
One way to look at that is that now she is going to counseling because she is a traumatized woman. Now she's trying to take care of her children.
Yes.
Could that be weaponized in that way for her? She's thinking it'll help her, but it might actually end up hurting her due to if something is written in there about her stability
The
or
Yeah.
content, right?
yeah,
The
the content
content
of
of
it.
those
Like
notes.
the very thing that's supposed to help you ends up hurting you, and that's part of the informed consent process. So
Yeah.
do you guys go through all that? Like do you say like, "Listen, these notes could really hurt you?"
Well, I mean, if we don't know what's in them yet, so I think that's also where you have to have a conversation with your client. Like, I don't know what you've been telling your there. You might,
Right.
I think that's a conversation that you have to have with them, and see if it's really, and like when they're saying, oh, I'm so traumatized, I want to bring that up, I don't know if that's really relevant. It's
So
not.
yeah, explain that, because that's one of the first things you said when we started the show. You said some stuff with this mental health piece is not relevant.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, if you're saying, oh, I'm very traumatized, certainly it is a traumatizing experience for many people. There's lots of emotions on probably both sides during a divorce. Um, it's kind of similar to like how Wisconsin is called a no fault state for divorce. So if somebody cheats on somebody, that shouldn't be coming up in court because it's simply just not relevant.
Yeah.
Um,
But
and
it's traumatizing.
it's traumatizing,
Right.
certainly.
Right.
And that's things that they might vent to their attorney about out, in the,
Mhm.
outside of
Yeah.
court, or vent to their family and their friends. But that it's
It's
a
not
no fault
relevant.
state. So that's not, doesn't get any weight in deciding how property is going to be divided or
Is that
Yeah.
given that's not even given weight though about how children are gonna be divided.
for what.
Trauma, like if you've endured an affair or you feel traumatized by all of
Mhm.
this, that's not even included in how children will be divided, right? Like
Right.
your trauma over an affair. And so then I think about too, like it just kind of dawned on me, like, I know you've worked with domestic violence victims and things like
Mhm.
that. I read that in your bio before. Um, there's a there's a distinction, maybe, I don't know, you can clarify. If a woman has been abused, like literally abused, that
Mhm.
doesn't always mean that the children won't have rights to the other parent,
Correct.
correct?
Yep.
Yeah, can you talk about that? Because I think that is like it's a problem. It's a problem for many people because how can that even be, right? How can that be? Can you speak to that at all? What's the
Yeah.
rationale behind that?
Courts always want to, try to encourage a relationship between parent and child. So just because the relationship between the parents has, been unhealthy or dissolved for whatever reason, that doesn't, they want to support that relationship between the parent and the child if it's healthy and safe and possible to do so. So, you
How do they
know,
determine that? How is that determined? Like the safety part?
that would be the guardian ad litem. That's
Mhm.
that's what they're there for.
Mhm. No, but I mean, like, it would be okay, so you've been abusive to your wife, right, whatever, or the wife's been abusive to
Yeah.
their husband, whatever. You've been abused by somebody. Is it a matter of like, well, the children were never abused though?
Yeah, they'll look at, was there ever physical abuse towards the children? Obviously,
Mhm,
that makes a huge difference.
Mhm.
Um, and, if there was it documented?
mm,
Was CPS ever called? Was there ever a police report where that was referenced? Did
Yeah.
kids ever go to school talking about it? Did they talk to a counselor and say something? Documentation is really the key when
Mhm.
you're bringing things to court. And then the other thing is, did the kids witness the abuse? Because just witnessing it is extremely traumatic, even if
I'm
they were
glad
never
you brought that up,
harmed,
yeah, mhm,
touched. It's just witnessing that, um, and I, that's harmful in itself. So I think when it comes to that, um, that's where guardian ad litem has to see, how has this affected kids? Do we need to do some sort of therapy between the child and the parent that was the abuser to try to mend that relationship, like
Yeah.
reunification counseling.
mhm,
Um, and then also putting the safeguards in place. Does there need to be a restraining order between the victim and the the abuser?
mhm.
And
How does that work? If there's a restraining order against the
yeah,
parents, like, how would that work?
yeah. So, I've seen there's a lot of places that do like safe exchanges. So when you're, changing between placement time, they can utilize a safe facility. A lot of times, they do that. I know in Green Bay, we do it there's a sheriff's department where they have a safe child exchange area because there's always officers at the building. It's well lit, there's cameras. So that's an option. Utilizing third parties. That's something that can be written into, a marital settlement agreement or an arrangement. Hey, we're going to use grandma. We're going to use um, an older sibling if they can drive. There's ways to work around that so that there doesn't have to be that contact. And as far as there's other ways to communicate and exchange the children without having that physical contact between the abuser and the victim.
Mhm. I think that's where, it gets gray, it gets muddy for people, right? So
Mhm.
because you've been victimized and that does impact your mental well-being, that, you wanna save your children, obviously, like, you wanna save them from
Yeah.
the potential of that type of abuse too. And I think that's where, like, people feel, the unfairness
Hmm.
of things like this because they have unfairly been through that, and the children have too. I
Yeah.
I would argue that any child in a household that's living with abuse is gonna be impacted negatively even if they didn't directly witness it, right?
I would agree.
There's Yeah, so I think that's where the unfairness anyway with, that goes, and the mental health, the unfairness of, like, you've been traumatized, but now your trauma is you're the patient now,
Yeah.
right? You're the victim and you're the patient, but the
Yeah.
other person kinda gets away scot-free, right? Is anybody asking that other person, "Are you getting help so that you're not abusive anymore? Are you getting help for your anger?" I don't know. Does that ever happen?
Yeah, I've seen it where like anger management is a requirement or
That's the
similar.
worst thing
Yes,
ever, anger
similar.
management, sorry.
Or
I've got feelings about anger management, just so you know, McKenna. Yeah.
just a therapist that specifically deals with domestic abuse. So maybe, I've seen situations where there's one therapist who I guess has like a program or specializes in domestic abuse, and they will meet separately with both the victim and then do separate sessions with the abuser.
Mhm.
So they
It
they get to know both parties and see what that dynamic was.
Mhm,
So I've seen that um, as a requirement, and that's again usually recommended by the guardian ad litem. They'll come in and say, "Hey, I think we should try this um, and see how this goes."
mhm.
So that guardian at litem, do they have specialty
Thanks for asking
education,
this.
specialty training, like, in everything from mental health to psychiatric medication to, family systems to trauma to like everything in
Mhm.
between? Like, are they specially trained so that they can understand all this?
They do get special training. Of course, not in like medication. They're not doctors. So when it comes to like them making recommendations, that's why it's never going to be a court's never going to say you need to take this medication
Right.
or you need. It's going to be you need to follow your doctor's recommendation.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah,
again, they're
that
not
feels so similar though, like,
Yeah,
there's
it does. It does feel similar. Like, because we talk about this as therapists, right? Like,
Mhm.
okay, let's broaden this for a second. Because we are not like we do training in psychopharmacology, right? But
Yeah.
we are not prescribers, right? We can't prescribe a medication,
Right.
right? But something that is very helpful for us to have training in is understanding what medications do,
Hmm.
what they don't do, what happens when people stop taking them,
Yeah.
what happens over the course of 3 months, 6 months, when, like, if someone stops a medication, here's what you might see happening.
Hmm.
Here's what a timeline looks like for someone who maybe starts a medication and
Yeah.
just keeps stacking more on.
Yeah.
And what does like being harmed actually look like as a parent? Because now you've got one that's as a person, right? You got somebody sitting here that's like doing everything right as a parent, but they're pretty drugged up. Like, they are
Yeah.
psychopharmacology, they are med stacked, right? So yes, they're going to work, and yes, they're doing the things and paying the bills they need to do, but they are just completely emotionally numb, or they are unable to do certain, like, I don't know, daily living things for their children because they can't connect at all with them because they're
Yeah.
going through withdrawal. Or here's what withdrawal looks like. So you have somebody who is acting erratically,
Yeah.
irrationally, and it's out of character for them. but it's because they're going through withdrawal, right? So I'm thinking about these specialty things that I mean, even us, we're not trained in, but when you
Mhm.
have a client who has this as part of their world,
Yeah.
that could change the trajectory from from like a legal standpoint
Mhm.
of, yeah, you're trying to argue this parent's unstable and we're arguing it's meds doing this or
Yeah.
something like that,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm just thinking about the intricacies of some of this that like cuz it sounds to me like that guardian at litem is like the gatekeeper for
They
a lot of
They
stuff,
have a
right?
lot of they definitely have a lot of power, again, because they kind of play that investigator role. They
Right.
they talk to everyone. So they're
Yeah.
talking to both sides. They're talking to the child. And again, they can get records. They can have the parents sign releases to get counseling records and medical records,
Yeah.
all of the
Yeah.
things.
All the records, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they do definitely hold a very
'Cause
powerful position in that way that
yeah.
they are doing an investigation, and then they are putting forth a recommendation to the court.
It's almost like you'd have to know these things to
Mhm.
then seek them out. Like, have some kind of knowledge of these different areas to even go, "Okay, maybe this is what's going on," and then to seek out some kind of documentation if it even exists,
Right.
right?
Right.
In some of these, like, more specialty areas.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
I'm more curious still about that fine line between are you doing what's recommended and a court order? Because I feel like that can hold somebody pretty close to like losing their kids if they don't do well. You don't do what the court is recommending, then here's the consequence for that, right? If the
Mhm.
court's recommending that you take medication, you're like, I don't want to because it makes me feel terrible,
Like, if you're
and I
chaptered, like, if you're a Chapter 51 kind of
yeah,
thing? Is
Mhm.
this what
yeah.
you're okay.
Yes, but not, right? Yes, but not. So, you had said and I'm gonna get this wrong, so you can please clarify, okay? Uh,
We are not
if you go
attorneys.
in there if you go in there and you're like the we've talked to psychiatrists, talked to psychologist or psychiatrist recommends, medication and client is refusing medication,
Mhm.
um you're like, "Okay, so if you refuse medication, you could possibly not have some type of visitation with your kids or some other type of thing, like, that could be used against you in court for choosing not to go down that path for mental health treatment, but yet it's not a Chapter 51, it's not really a
Mhm.
court order, but it's like a strong suggestion, right? And if you don't, there could be consequences. Is that what I'm hearing?
The only way there would be consequences is if the other party brought that to the court's attention.
Meaning?
Like
Yeah,
if the other party knew that hey, you're supposed to be following your doctor's recommendations,
but you're not,
and if
yeah.
they knew that part of that or if they've been somebody who's been on medication per their doctor's recommendation for many many years during say when they were married, and then if they for some reason find out, oh, I think they're off their meds, or I know they're not taking their meds, how they would know that I don't know, especially if they're separated living in different households, but that would have to be an issue if they believe that the other party's not following a court
Yep,
order. That would have to be brought up, like
yeah.
You're
raised
talking
by.
about a court order if they've been court ordered to take medication and they're not,
They can't
right?
be court ordered to take medication. I've never seen that. Again, it's going to be court ordered to follow their doctor's recommendations.
That's such a close like, I'm not understanding the distinction. Like, I'm getting I'm not under if you're court ordered to follow what your doctor says, isn't that a court if the doctor says take medication, isn't that technically a court order to take medication?
Got to follow what your doctor says. So,
Okay, like, it's a cousin, like, we're cousins here, right? Like, that feels like a cousin, doesn't
yeah.
it?
We're the same family tree.
The same family tree, like, that's where I'm getting lost in, so I'm like
Hmm.
so I feel like even though it's not a Chapter 51 court
Right.
order, it still is a a court order that
Yeah.
could be weaponized later. It
Right. Again,
yeah.
but if I mean, you'd have to kind of have proof that they're not taking their medication, or at least
Right,
things to be able to
right.
bring it up and say, hey, they're not doing this.
Yeah, like, it has to somehow be documented, right?
Right.
Like there has to be some kind of way to prove that, right? So you'd
Mhm.
be able to see whether or not somebody was actually even picking up a script at a
Right.
pharmacy,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Like whether or not they're even doing that. Like in
Yeah.
terms, I get what you're saying, McKenna, like in terms of like what like we don't you're not there to know
To
whether or
see
not.
them physically
Yes.
take
Are you
Right.
physically
To
taking this?
know.
Are we in the prison doing a mouth check? Right?
right.
Let's see.
Right.
Did you swallow that? Right?
So I
Like,
get the burden of proof would be on the other person who's bringing it forward,
They would
right?
have to
Like
raise that issue
right,
and say, "Hey, I don't believe they're following this court order, and this is why, and
right,
here's why I believe that." And then, then they turn
right.
to the other party and say, "Okay, what do you have to say?" And that's when
mhm,
they
Right.
might say, "Hey, I haven't been, and this is why." Because it's
Yes.
actually making me worse. And, I've been talking to my therapist about it, and maybe I have
Mhm.
documentation to show that.
mhm.
Yeah.
So in that way, again, there's a hurdle to get over before it's
Mhm.
going to be
Yeah.
all these consequences. The
Right.
court's going to want to hear from both
Sure.
sides and say, "Hey, okay, if this is true, why is that? What's going on?"
Mhm.
Right. Right.
It's just so interesting to me how all of this can be brought in as, like, the primary issue, for and I get it, it can definitely be a primary issue for some people,
Mhm.
but when it's not a primary issue and becomes one, like, I feel
Yeah,
like yeah, I feel like that's when it become,
Mhm.
scary, weaponizing, things like that, and that's where mental health stigma can live too, right? Like,
yeah,
so that's why people don't wanna bring it up in court because they're feeling like if I don't bring it up, then nobody knows, and then it won't ever be brought up against me, but
right.
eventually it's gonna be brought up, right? And I talk about this too with people with addiction stuff. I tell them, like, "Go get treatment."
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
just go. Go do the thing, go get treatment, whatever, and then you're being proactive at
Yes,
least,
yeah,
right?
and that definitely has some weight, to show,
Right.
"Hey, I recognize that I had a problem and I chose to do something about it."
Mhm.
That definitely looks I think it can look, really great on, to
It could look better
have
for
that
someone
paper to
anyway.
show.
Yeah. Mm.
And, addiction and mental health are obviously so closely intertwined.
Mhm.
So there's lots of, new ways that courts are adapting to try to still encourage those relationships, even when parents are struggling with addiction. So I want to make very clear that, just because if there is a mental health diagnosis or struggle or addiction, that's not an automatic,
Right.
it's not an
Not your ace in the hole. It's not someone's ace in the hole, and I think that is what it's being almost used as, like, addiction or mental health is
automatic.
somebody's ace in the hole to get a child away from the other
Yep.
person, and that's not accurate.
Right,
Yeah.
there's certainly different things, like, they have, SoberLink is one of the new big
Oh,
things,
yeah. I
the
have
health
clients that use that. Mhm.
yeah, yeah, so, like, the
Yeah.
handheld breathalyzer with the facial recognition, sometimes there's maybe a condition, like, "Hey, before, X amount of hours before it's your time to have the kids, you have to do that." Um,
Yep.
Mhm.
I've seen that too.
and maybe that's
Mhm.
only a condition for, say, the next 6 months. There might be different timelines, on what that looks like, but that's definitely a possibility. And then, hey, if after 6 months, if things are going well, there's no issues, then maybe we'll increase your time.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
I've seen stuff similar to that happen. Drug testing, um, whether
Yeah.
that be hair testing, urine
Mhm.
sample. There's lots of different options.
Yeah. I like SoberLink, by the way, if anyone's listening to, what SoberLink is, it's a breathalyzer
Mhm.
essentially, and it sends a report to people. So, if you fail it or if you're late or whatever, so it does that. So I do like that, especially if you're truly in recovery and
Yeah,
you've got nothing to lose, right? Like it's usually the people, not to be the ones who don't want to do it are the ones who are still using. So, often, not always,
yeah,
they just want to be trusted, right? Which I get that.
yeah.
But truly, if you want your kids are going to do whatever it takes anyways in my mind, whatever it takes to, have time with them, and that might be SoberLink. So, yeah, that's a nice little commercial for SoberLink. We should call them and let them know. So,
We are
would you
not
like to pay us
endorsed.
for that? Would you
We're
like
not
to pay us
endorsed
for
by
that?
SoberLink.
Yes. All right, McKenna, our time is up here. Is there anything else that you would like to, make sure that our listeners understand when it comes to mental health and, family court?
Yeah, I think, it's important to be super open and honest with your attorney. I think, it's always hard for us when there's skeletons in the closet that we didn't
Right.
know about, and it comes out. It's a lot easier to know about it and to say, hey, we can work with this. Thank you for telling me. We can show that you've been working on improving your mental health or working towards overcoming an addiction. It's always easier to prep for that and know ahead of time. So I think, just taking that first step to be open and honest with your attorney. And hey, maybe it will never even come up. But if it does, you kind of are a step ahead and prepared
Right.
to deal with that. And
Mhm.
again, to get in front of it, maybe have a conversation with the guardian ad litem if there's a guardian ad litem involved. And just, again, think about your kids, you know, take those steps. If trust needs to be rebuilt, like the sober link, like if you're willing to do that, I think that's great. Um, that you're trying to fight for your kids and do that. So yeah, I think don't look at mental health as like a death sentence. Like don't think that that's going to be the only factor that's considered, and just be proactive, get in front
Mhm.
of it. Yeah.
And I wanna
Right.
make it clear that, spouses should not be diagnosing each other or, assessing. Leave that up to the professionals. All
Yes.
right. All right, thank you so much for being here, McKenna. I do have a statement I wanna read real quick, Jen, about the MedWatch, if we can do that real quick.
Yeah.
If you've been harmed by SSRI or SNRI withdrawal, your story matters. We're calling on you to submit your experience to the FDA's MedWatch system. Let's make it impossible for them to ignore us. Join us in submitting your story at antidepressantinfo.org. The deadline is approaching in October, so we need as many people on that as we possibly can get. All right, so thank you so much, McKenna, for joining us. And if you've hung around with us this far, this is the Gaslit Truth podcast. You can follow us on anywhere you listen to podcasts and Instagram and Facebook, and you can follow Jen and I and all the social platforms. So thank you so much for being here, and that's a
Thank
wrap.
you for having me.
Thank you,
Yes.
McKenna.
It's a great conversation.